Welcome to another episode of Epic Gamer Dad Reviews. On today's episode, we are featuring Star Fox on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, also known as the SNES. Nintendo released Star Fox on February 21st, 1993. Star Fox also went on record as selling 2.9 million copies. Star Fox would go on and set the standard for all rail shooters alike. This title also pushed the Super Nintendo to its absolute limit. They managed to break through the limits on the original hardware featuring the FX booster chip.
You are witnessing a new technology. The first and only game powered by the Super FX microchip. Why go to the next level when you can go light years beyond? You are Fox McCloud in Star Fox, only for the Super Nintendo Entertainment System.
This chip was developed by Argonaut Software. Argonaut found a way on increasing processing power by personally developing a chip that would work with the original SNES hardware. This boost didn't just give the illusion of a 3D effect, but it helped to push the system into full 3D scaling and rendering. So what do you get with an FX chip and some Mode 7 magic? Well, you get Star Fox. This chip also went on other games later in the lifespan of the SNES, including Yoshi's Island. If you would like to know more about Argonaut Software, there will be a link in the description below. So the big elephant in the room is this. Does the game hold up 30 years later? I'm gonna have to say, kinda sorta, mostly yes. The graphics, simply as they are, they suck. Yeah, they suck with no ifs, ands, or buts. At times, the game also suffers from horrible frame rate drops. This often is one of the effects that makes the game hard to play at times. Items and objects will appear out of nowhere or very close to your craft. The more you play the game, the more you learn the pattern, and then it does become easier to predict, thus making the game easier to play. With what seems like a visually dead game, we gotta keep in mind with what was being used here. When you think about what it took to put what you saw on the screen, you start to appreciate it, regardless of how it measured up to 3D standards today. When playing this game, we gotta keep in mind these graphics were being processed on a 16-bit console that had less than 800 kilobits worth of processing power, running at a whopping 3.58 megahertz. That's a teeny processor, and on top of that it only had 128 kilobits of RAM? You get more out of a kid's leapfrog gamepad today. So with all that being said, let's talk about the controls. They are great and surprisingly responsive. The game mechanics are fun once you get used to the graphical limitations. Even though you're playing on an old school digital directional pad, it still feels natural to use in the game, and you still get a sense of floating and flight. You get to choose from 3 different difficulties by stage numbers. Stage 1 is your main run, Stage 2 is harder, and Stage 3 is the hardest. When you end up getting blasted and take damage, and you lose a wing, you carry that damage to the next level. You get your shields replaced, but that's about it. You can acquire extra lives by making the score count at the end of the level. There are some pretty cool power upgrades to this game. Every time you get a blaster upgrade, they get better and better. You start with a single blaster, then you get dual blasters, and then you get the super blasters. The super blasters look around and have a different sound. If you manage to find a 4th blaster upgrade, I think you get even more of a powerful blaster. It looks the same, but it seems to have more of a bass hit when you do hear it going off in concession as you hit the fire button, and it does seem to do more damage. If you know for sure that there is a level 4 in the weapons upgrade, please let us know in the comments below. I would love to know. Bombs are a good tool in the game. However, it is hard to learn the depth perception and the actual damage range. When it seems to vary, I still haven't found a consistent blast radius. Another cool feature the game uses are some awesome voice effects. They honestly sound really good. The soundtrack is unforgettable. They really use great sound to enhance the emotion and anticipation of what's coming next. Each level comes to life, and the majority of the excitement really does come from the music. Even though the game is linear and is basic, the sound does give a much needed dimension. I really think if the controls and the sound quality were any less than perfect, then this game would have flopped. Another thing that you will see about games in the past was their storytelling. Most games didn't really care about the story unless they were well thought out and in an RPG. I would have to say most games in that genre didn't have a real in-depth story. I mean, look at games like Zelda series for example. Really, in my opinion, it took until Zelda Ocarina of Time before it really had a powerful story that impacted the player. Star Fox is no different in this regard. The creators of Star Fox were all about the gameplay and experience. They laid out just enough character dimension to where you can accept the aesthetic and design that they wanted to build in the game. They wanted to set things in place to where if the game was successful, then they could eventually create a better story. I call this type of character progression the classic Nintendo strategy. Well, I guess it would be better to say classic building blocks for amazing games. I mean, look at Halo. Even Super Mario got a pretty cool story later. I'm sorry, I digress. Back to the game. Okay, on a personal note, this game, it's not my favorite. I remember I rented it a couple times from Blockbuster, but it never really hit home for me as a main genre of games that I played on the SNES. I often played fighters. So okay, Star Fox is overall a good game. I wouldn't say a great game, but it's definitely a good game. It is fun to play. When playing this game, it's enjoyable to think about how far video games have really come, especially comparing this game to Star Fox 64. I will say that this game has slowly become a go-to when I do play the SNES, but that's only because I don't have my favorite game of all time, Turtles Tournament Fighters. Well, that's the end for this review for Star Fox. I hope you enjoyed this video. Hey, if you do like these videos, well, you know what to do. So once again, thank you for taking time to watch another episode of the Epic Gamer Dad Reviews.